Okay, so this week's broadcast, let me just get myself set up over here so I can see what's going on. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
I'll tell you two cool stories. So the Tosh Rebbe says over a story with Arizal that the Arizal was invited to a bris. Oh, I forgot. I keep on forgetting. Let me announce first the sponsors. The sponsor for that broadcast, this week's broadcast, is Mechi and Leah Wurzberger for a schus for Shalema for Mrs. Wurzberger's sister, Re'ia Bastzila, and by the Anisfeld family, with Nishmas Mos Gold Bas Reb Ezer Allah Shalom, which is Shaul's mother, whose yahrzeit is Wednesday, and in appreciation of ABC, in appreciation of Akiva Bolter's Broadcasting Commission. So the Tosher Rebbe writes over a story with Arizal. The Arizal was invited to a bris, and it was a very wealthy man, one of the wealthiest men in Tzfas at the time. And he told him what time the bris is. And of course, the Arizal did not show up, even though he was before the days of Rebbe's, because the Arizal came before Chassidus. Oh, 1 second. I'm getting a back feed, and I think I know why. So give me 1 second, please. I'm just stopping the share for a second. Give me 1 second. No, I'm not sure why I'm getting a back feed. I thought it was because of the YouTube, but it's not. So we'll go back to where we were holding before. So the Arizal was invited to the bris, and of course, he shows up late. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and he's not coming. In the afternoon, of course, they had a big pot of food that was cooking for the guests of the bar mitzvah, of the bris, and all of a sudden a dog dashes in to the kitchen, jumps into the pot, gets burned to death, cooks to death, and dies. And right after that, as soon as it happened, Arizal walks in. But he was Dari in those days. He wasn't Arizal. And he said, let me tell you what happened. What happened was, he said, is this dog, Dari told the owner, was the Gilgal of Gehazi, who was the Meshamish to Elisha Navi, and he was valgering because of the Averis that he did. And he was also one of the four Mitzrayim is brought out. And he needed a tikkun, and he came to me, I need a tikkun. He said, I knew, Dari also tells us, Dari tells us, I knew that you have a big enemy in the city who hates you. And what he did was he actually slipped poison into the pot that you were cooking, and you would have probably died, and many of your guests would have died. So when this Gehazi came to me that he needs a tikkun, I told him, if you're Moshe Nefesh, to save the people from eating this poison, and you jump into the pot, that'll be your tikkun for your neshama. And that's what happened. He jumped into the pot. So that's the message over to Ari. I guess you can't say those stories over about anybody else, but you could say it about Ari. But I'll tell you one more interesting story about the Tosher Rebbe that someone told me today. That is as follows. A lot of people heard of Rabbi Menashe Yisrael Reisman. Is there anyone here who does not know who Menashe Yisrael Reisman is?
He's the one who gives the Nachshirs?
He gives a daily shir in Eretz Yisrael. He's a Belzer Chassid. He's in his 40s. He's a superstar guy. He must give 5 shiurim a day on different subjects. He gives a Fyoim, he gives a Chumash shir. He's a tremendous, tremendous guy. His shiurim are probably listened to by people all over the world. He even had a moifis. By one of his shiurim. About 8-9 years ago, there was a Bezek employee, an Arab, who ran down and killed somebody who was waiting at a bus stop on Malcha Yisrael. And the story behind the story is he used to do the route in the Belzer area where Menashe Yisrael Reisman said shir. And every day around 9:30, 10, Menashe Yisrael finished his shir, and about 40, 50 people would stream out of the building. And it's those 40, 50 people that were the target of this terrorist attack. And he was waiting there with his car to run down these 50 people as they would stream out of the Smedish. That day was the only day in history that Menashe Yisrael, he never leaves Yisrael, he never goes anywhere, but for some reason, he accepted upon himself to travel somewhere in Europe to say a shir, a chizuk shir. So he was away one day. And that day, this terrorist, they have him on camera, he waited for a half hour after people would normally come out. And he saw for some reason Every other day they come out. Today they're not coming out. So he had to drive around to find another victim. And Lo Yaleinu, he found the victim on Malchi Yisrael. So that was one of the moifsim about Menashe Shir. But anyway, there was a Yid whose name was Gansfried. He was a wealthy guy, and he married, this goes back 50 years ago, he married a woman in Montreal. He was a wealthy younger man. And his wife was having a baby, so he came to Montreal. His wife should have the baby by her parents. After the baby was born, the Tosher Rebbe heard this guy is in town. So the Tosher Rebbe sent a message, I want that younger man, Gansfried, I want to come to me. So he comes to the Tosher Rebbe. And Tosher Rebbe says, you have a relative in town who's in big trouble. He's not well. He's doesn't. I want you to write me out a check right now for $100,000 to give this relative. Now, $100,000 40 years ago, in the 70s, was what was it? Was like $1 million today. It was a huge amount of money. So the guy told the Tosher Rebbe, I can't. That's like I'm a well-to-do guy, but a check like that, I can't do that. The Tosher Rebbe was pressuring him. And he couldn't budge. So finally, the Tosher Rebbe says, if you give him this money, I promise you, you're going to have a son-in-law who will make all of Klal Yisrael happy. And he says, I can't do it. But he did give him a check for $50,000. Now, this guy, Gansfried, is the father-in-law of Rabbi Menashe Yisrael Reisman. So he says, could you imagine, this is what I got for $50,000. Could you imagine what I would have gotten for $100,000? That's the story that I heard today. Okay, so let's see the Mishnah. We're talking about shoveling food for a behemoth. Gorfin milafnei petem. If you have an ox that you're trying to fatten up, so that it should be so that you could shecht it. Is Akiva here? I'm not sure if Akiva is here, but we learned a couple of weeks ago in Parshas Pinchas that Klal Yisrael were easy ben putizeh. They used to fatten up animals to serve to Avodah Zarah. So someone who fattens up animals in order to shecht them, you're allowed to clean out the trough that it has its food in, because in that food would be rocks and other psoilus that the animal wouldn't want to eat. And if you don't clear that out, the animal is going to refuse to eat, and that'll cause you a lot of damage because you're trying to fatten up this animal. So you're allowed to clean out whatever's in there, shovel it all out. And umasalkin l'tztaten. And what if there was a lot of feed that was all over the floor around the animal? We're afraid the animal's going to move around. It's going to step on the food. It'll leave excrement on the food, and then the animal won't want to eat it. So you're allowed to take away, if there's too big of a paw, you're allowed to take some away, so it shouldn't get dirtied. And this way the animal will not refuse to eat it.
Shabbos. This is all on Shabbos.
This is correct. It's all on Shabbos.
That's
What's that?
That's the Masechta we're learning, right?
Well, listen, after what we learned on Friday, it seems like anything is fair game for Shabbos. And Chacham Maser, Neutlen milofnei behemezu, v'neutlen lofnei behemezu b'Shabbos. If this animal has enough and you have extra food, you're allowed to bring it over to another animal. And this is it's not tircha yisera. These are all things that you're allowed to do. Frek the Gemara, Iboil Rabbanan who say oisrin are Reisha Polig, are Reisha Pligi. Are they just arguing about Garfin and they don't allow Garfin? Or Yaseva Pligi, or they also not allow you to move extra feed to the side so the animal shouldn't stand on it. Or Yatavaya Pligi, or maybe they're arguing on both and they say everything is us. Tashma. The Tanya Vacham Oimim Echadja Vechadja Lo Yisal Kenu Litztaten. Regardless, you can't do it. So you see the Chacham are answering in both cases. Omar Chista, Nachloikis Be'eba Shal Karka. This question, if you're allowed to clear out the trough, is only if it's a trough in the ground. So basically, they would build a little trench in the ground, or if it wasn't even a trench, they just had a little area of the ground that was fenced in, so to speak, and that's where they piled up the feed. That's where there's a machloikis whether or not you're allowed to shovel away the dirt, because you're going to be evening out, you're going to be smoothing out any holes, a shviya gumois, which is an issue deraisa. Avol be'iva shal kli, if you had a trough that was a keli made out of wood, for instance, divra akoil mutter, everybody agrees you'd be able to clean that out on Shabbos. Can you say that there's a machlokes and there's someone who actually holds you're allowed to shovel out a trough that's in the earth? He's for sure going to be mashva gumois. You wouldn't be able to allow that. So how could you even suggest that the Tanakama, that Reb Doisa holds to that? The machlekes is by a trough where you cannot even have a shvuya gumois. It's a wooden keli. And the whole reason why the chum asher by ibishal kli is people might not differentiate. If they see they're allowed to clean out and shovel out this trough made out of wood, they're also going to shovel out troughs in the ground, and that's what they're I said. Rabbi Doisa no, people won't make that mistake. You could let them shovel out a trough that's made out of wood or some other material, but not of something that's in the ground. Now we're discussing about eating leftovers. The shaila of shirayim. When is shirayim allowed? I remember once I was by the stall in the tish as a boy in Eretz Yisrael as a yeshiva bacher, and after kiddush, I can't imagine they would do this nowadays. But after kiddush, they passed around the becher itself from person to person to drink from. Today, I don't know if that becher would disappear or not, but they passed around the becher from person to person. So when they passed it to me, I asked the person who passed it to me, is the becher rein? Is the becher clean? So the guy answered to me, "Semizan rein. Jeder trinkt davon. It's got to be clean. Everyone's drinking from it." So ich habe verstanden exactly what it was. That was before the days of COVID, of course. So here we're talking about animals eating leftovers from each other. Zok the Hele Gemara. Tana, Chada. One brayso says, "Noitlin milfnei behema shapia yofe." You're allowed to take food from an animal who has a nice mouth, and what a nice mouth means we'll soon see. And you could put it in front of an animal who has a bad mouth. Another brayso says exactly the opposite. So the Gemara is going to say both these braysos mean exactly the same thing, but there's certain. You could take one animal and you can call it piyah yafa because it has certain ways where it's piyah yafa, and you can call that same animal piyah because there's our ways where it's piyah. So they're both saying the same thing, and now the Gemara is going to detail what that is. Everybody agrees that you're allowed to take food from a donkey's trough, and you're allowed to transfer it to the trough of an ox. But you're not allowed to transfer food from the trough of an ox to the trough of a donkey. But we're going to soon see how a donkey could be piyah and piyah yafa, and a parah could also be piyah yafa. It depends on the perspective. So that we'll see how that translates. When the brayso says you're allowed to take from the donkey because it's piyah yafa, what does piyah yafa mean? It's bechamor de les leirin. A chamor when it eats doesn't drool, so the food that it's eating doesn't become disgusting, full of the saliva of the animal. So since it stays clean, therefore you're allowed to take feed from a chamor, put it in front of a parah on Shabbos, because the parah will eat it. If it was ruined food, then it's a tircha for no purpose. But since if you take food from a chamor, it doesn't have a disgusting drool all over it, and if you place it in front of the parah will be happy to eat it, so therefore you're allowed to do it. The isleiriri, because a parah drools, so the feed that it leaves over is disgusting, and therefore a chamor would not eat it. Again, is b'chamor. Why are we calling a chamor piyara? A chamor is not so picky. He's not such a picky eater. He'll even eat, Rashi says, koitzim or varkonim. He'll eat thorns and other twigs, but not saliva. He's not going to he will not eat the saliva of a cow. But the parah is very picky about what it eats. It won't eat food that has twigs or thorns mixed into it. But the article speaks out, avada, a cow, even though it drools, it will eat together with another cow, and it'll eat the leftovers from another cow, and the other drool won't bother this cow. Okay, now we're getting into a lot of halacha l'maisa, and I'm going to want to learn the halacha because it makes a huge difference. It's very practical stuff, and there's a lot of machlokes in here, so I'll try to keep things simple. Hakash shal gabi hamita. What if somebody has straw on the bed? Now, you might think if it's straw on the bed, it's probably there to be my padding. No. Rashi tells us that stoma lasaka. There's straw on the bed, but it's you assume that it's dedicated to be used as fuel. And therefore, umuksahu. Now, he has muksa on his bed, uval lishko, and he wants to sleep on there. But there's a muktzah there, so how does he deal with it? So he's not trying to get it off the bed. He wants the straw there. The straw acts as his padding, but he wants it sort of spread out so that it should be comfortable. So right off the bat, you see from here that something that's muktzah is not asher bana. You're allowed to benefit. You're allowed to lie on straw, even though it's muktzah, and it's for your comfort. You're allowed to have enough of it. However, the elephant brought down that there's the Rashba makes us the Rashba asks from Gemaras where you find you're not allowed to have hana, you're not allowed to benefit from muktzah, and he explains that there's a difference between muktzah and noilad. Something that's noilad is worse than something that's regular muktzah, and something that's noilad you would not be able to have hana from. But we're speaking about standard muktzah. Okay, so what do you do? This again is a very big area of dispute. What do you mean with the begufa? It says loy and then the biyada begufa. So what does it say over here? Loy de biyada the muksahu of the begufa. So Rashi b'kseifov with his shoulder. So it's called the tiltel malatzadu loy shmei tiltel. So we're soon going to see that there's different ways to accomplish tiltel malatzad. The way that we've discussed here so far in the Mishnah is you're moving something around, you're moving the straw around in an unconventional fashion. Rather than using your hand, you're using your shoulder. That's going to be an important point too. What if this straw was designated to be Michael Behema, which is therefore not Muktzah on Shabbos? Or he had a sheet or pillows on that bed with the straw, so clearly he's already dedicated the straw as a bed, so now it's not Muktzah at all. Then you're even allowed to move the straw around with your hand. So they used to have presses. A lot of people have these presses in their homes that they put their pants in overnight and it presses their pants. So what they used to have
What happened?
I think his internet is down. His internet was schwach going in. He's going to have to log back in, I think.
Akiva, in the meantime, you're the fill-in.
Was it just me who got thrown off?
Yep,
Was it just me?
just you.
Yeah, just you.
So it's my internet again. I apologize.
Very seldom that the Maggid shear gets thrown out of shear.
Yosy and I didn't take 10 seconds and I was already taking over. They pushed me. They forced me.
I remember one night I was in the sukkah and we didn't have enough covers or pillows for everybody. We were all huddled together. And in the middle of the night, I had an emergency service call, as people our age tend to have. So by the time I came back, you would have my place on the bed, my cover, my pillow was already distributed that I would have never known anyone was sleeping there. And I realized how long it's going to take for them to split up the Yerusha. The body won't even be cold yet. Okay, let's see what the Gemara says weiter. So we were in the middle of describing this press. I'm not sure when we lost. So you had this big board with 4 pegs. Then there's a heavier board that has corresponding 4 holes. So when you put the one board on top of the other board, it went straight down because those pegs held it in place. Now you wanted to put pressure on. Yes.
The art school Mishnayos has a picture of it.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, a picture says 1,000 words. Let me highlight. I'm going to highlight your video, which is beautiful. I'll highlight it. Okay, can everyone see it now in the center?
Yeah. Start in the
Okay,
center.
so you can see there's a board. I think I spotlighted, yeah. So there's a board and there's another corresponding board on top of it with pegs so that it goes straight down. And in those pegs were holes that you can put cotter pins in so that the board would stay down, and there were pins that went through the pegs that held the top board down, and that made it very tight. That put a lot of pressure to allow it to press well. So that's exactly what this michbish is. They have professional.
First time is flush toilets they didn't have, but presses a size like that they had.
Could you
Yeah,
imagine?
priorities, Dave.
That's right. Well, no one invented it. It could be if people had invented flush toilets, they would have been more popular. But yeah, I hear it. Okay, so mikveh shabalabatim matirin, you're allowed to open it up. So if you have those pegs in and it's sealed down, and you want to take your suit out because you had it there from before Shabbos, you're allowed to pull the pegs out, lift up the heavy board, and pull your pants out. But you're not allowed to put your pants back in and weigh it down. But if it's a professional press at the dry cleaner, and Rashi says, those are much, much more robust and they're done more professionally. That lo yiga boy, you're not allowed to touch it. That's all muktzah. If even if it was a kaivsim, if it was already opened up, if it was partially open, you're allowed to open the rest of it and you're allowed to take it out. And there's a machlokes rishonim as to whether or not Rabbi Yehuda is arguing. Rabbi Yehuda is saying it's halacha only by a professional, not by a professional, and it's kedai for us to see the halacha l'maisa on this press. So let's see the base. The base says that it's Torah Shulchan Aruch Shin Beis Daled. So let's quickly at Shin Beis Daled. Okay, let's see what we say. What it says here in the Shavua. Machbish who klisha koifsim by begodim achar kvisa then shtei luchai cells. Like David shared the picture with us. Thank you very much. Vabegodim benem shabalabayis material noisoy lital mimena begodim latzorach Shabbos v'shalumen oser because tishu takav bechazak is very tight. Terasa doimel estira, and opening up such a press is doimel estira. So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says in Sivkatan Chaf. Sivkatan Chaf is over here. L'tzorech Shabbos, av shloich Shabbos, v'hudin de kaivshin by begodim shu tzorech. Of course, the Chazaka v'mhoya mutar amachbish ksas me'erev Shabbos. It was slightly opened. Yeshorim, there are those who hold the aval pikin oser lahatakuloi v'lishmut kela bisham. There are those who hold it's oser. Yeshmakil, there are those who hold it's mutar. Avalim hoya mutar kuloi was fully opened. L'chulam mutar lishmut kela bisham. So that's Rabbi Kiveger discussing the machloikis in our Mishnah. It really says if it's open the Erev Shabbos, if you can fully open it up. So we have a machloikis if it's slightly open or if it's not slightly opened, if you're allowed to open it up on Shabbos. Okay. Omer Reb Nachman. We still have to get in to the halacha of this tiltul minatzad. So far, our Mishnah tells us that the tiltul minatzad of Rashi's explanation, moving the straw around, straw which is muktzah, moving it around with your shoulder, that's going to be allowed. Zok the Gemara. Omer Reb Nachman, Hai Pugla, and this is a case we had many times where we were talking about vegetables that you put into the ground, not to plant them, but just to keep them cool. It was something like a radish. It was a radish, let's say you placed in the ground to keep it cool, to keep it fresh. I'll just draw a quick, small picture of what it's illustrating. Let's see if I can find a blank piece of paper here to write on. Okay, so let's say you have.
This is all before refrigeration, and they used to
That's
store
correct.
it in the ground.
Under the ground. So let's say the ground level would be over here. So if I pull this out by its leaves, if I pull this out by its leaves, I'm actually not displacing any soil because it gets narrower as it goes down. But what if I put that radish in like this? And this is all under the ground. So when I pull this, even though I'm not touching muktzah, but I am displacing this earth over here and this earth over here. I'm moving it. So that's also called tiltul minatzad.
Oops. Oops.
Who's his internet provider?
His neighbor. Why, are you looking to sell him a new contract?
Nah, I don't have these problems.
Kosher
I live
nets,
down the
kosher
street.
nets.
He wants to make sure not to have the
Kosher
same
net.
internet provider.
Kosher nets.
Stick to Bell and Rogers. You don't have these problems.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to change internet services now.
Okay, sign up. You have a good plan.
What's that?
We have a good plan for you. We're all talking about new plans for you.
Well, we're gonna pay for his internet. Let's not go that far.
Yeah, we don't want to spend so much money on this year.
Okay, let's see what happens with it.
Maybe you can steal from my house.
I think that's too far.
Might be
Okay,
too
let
far.
me get my shared back in over here.
Chaim Tzvi, you used up all the stock from last week?
David, I got a lot of people here. But you know what, Yosy Zalman, we saw? We noted that our appreciation for this year doesn't go very deep in our pockets. Nobody wants to provide a new internet service for you.
No, I don't think it would help. I'll be honest with you. No matter what service I use, I don't think I think in my area it's not so good.
Uh-huh. Okay, makes us feel a little bit better.
Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says over here. Oh, but now it's blurry. I can't get my camera to focus. Let's try this again. This is crazy. Now my camera refuses to focus. Okay, one second. Let me try this one more time. We'll get it to focus. That focuses and it shuts off. Let me see if I can get it to focus. It's not working. Let's see. Do you see it going in and out of focus?
You're not focused.
It's not. It focuses
Only
and
out.
it loses focus.
No.
Oh, if it's just
Worse.
now I'm having trouble. Okay, I'll just have to read the Gemara inside. I don't want to fix it now. I'll have to fix it later. Okay, so Zok to Gemara. Zok to Gemara. Omar Nachman, hi Pogla, milamayla lamata shari, milamata lamayla osir. But milamayla lamata will be osir because you're going to be displacing the earth as you pull the radish out of the ground. Omar Vadabar Ava, Omar Beirav, Tanina like Rab Nachman. Our Mishnah seems to indicate not like Rab Nachman, because Rab Nachman is saying that the tiltul benatzad will be osir because he does not allow you to pull the radish out upside down because it's going to displace the soil. However, our Mishnah says that you are allowed to move it around benatzad. Rashi says like with your shoulders. Tanina like Rab Nachman, Hakash al gabi amita, lo yinana biyadai. He should not move it around with his hand. He's allowed to move it with his goof. But shmamina, from the fact that one is allowed, to move around with his shoulder on the bed, you see from here that tiltul menatad lo shmei tiltul. I just unplugged my camera. Maybe it'll reboot if I plug it back in. Let's see what happens. Okay, so shmamina tiltul menatad lav shmei tiltul, and that should be mutter. Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, let's stop. So we're bribing halacha l'maisa that tiltul menatad lo shmei tiltul, and it's going to be mutter. Now the problems that we have over here is there's certain difficulties. First of all, number one, there's a very big difference. Between there's a steer that's asked by the Rishonim. Let's look at what we're discussing over here. When I'm moving the radish, why am I moving the radish?
Can you just demonstrate for us how you're going to move the radish with your shoulder from the side? I'm just not getting it. Maybe
With my shoulder. We're talking about lying on the bed to move the straw around. The radish, the tiltul benatzad is I'm lifting the radish out of the ground, and then the radish indirectly is going to displace the soil. So I'm not moving that with my shoulder. Then I'm actually grabbing the point of the radish at the bottom, lifting it out of the earth, and then the earth around it is going to be displaced.
Yes,
there-
even if the radish, if you pull it out and it's not wider, some of the earth on the side might fall in. No,
That's not a problem because I'm not directly doing that anyway. It's not even tiltum on tzad.
Oh.
Tiltum on tzad is what I'm touching is directly moving the earth. So sure, if I pull it out and now the sand fills up the hole, that's not even called tiltum on tzad.
that's not a problem. Okay.
So the Gemara is saying over here that I'm allowed to pull the radish out. Now pulling the radish out, I'm being metaltal a dover muksa, letzorich a dover that's not muksa. Why am I pulling I'm moving the earth? Why am I moving the earth? I'm moving the earth because I need the radish, which is not muksa. There, I understand that it's going to be mutter. But on the bed, how could I move around the straw? I'm moving around the dover muksa, letzorich dover muksa. So when is there a heter of tiltum and atzad? That's only letzorich dover she'ena muksa. I need my radish, but the straw remains muksa. We discussed
Why is the straw muktzah?
Because the straw is assumed to be a fuel. It's not a Michael, and it wasn't there to be used as your bed. If you designated it before Shabbos to be used as your bed, and the Mishnah's example is if you have a sheet there and a pillow there, clearly you've designated the straw to be part of your bed, and it's not muksa. But under normal circumstances, by default, we always assume that straw is being used for fire, and therefore it's going to be muksa on Shabbos. So here you're directly moving the muksa. It's from that tzad because you're using your shoulder, but you're moving the muksa, l'tzarech dover muksa. That's much worse. So that's the shaila that they deal with. So let's just have a look. See here in the halacha. It's aleph. It's tushach simin shinur aleph ches. So we got to get a little bit clear what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do.
So Yosy, there's no problem with eating a food from the ground or taking food from the ground on Shabbos?
We're not talking about food that you're harvesting. What we're talking about,
it's in the ground. The roots in it's growing until you.
We're talking about food that has already been pulled out of the ground.
I thought you're pulling the radish out of the ground.
Back into the ground to store because they didn't have refrigerators in those days.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry, I missed that.
So, yeah, it's already harvested. Otherwise, it's a deraisa of tlisha. So it's harvested already, and that's why we can discuss if it's upside down. If it was growing in the ground, never will a radish be growing upside down in the ground. This is stuff that you buried to keep it cool. I'm just going to try one more time to share my screen and to see if it focuses.
You're still going to move aside the.
Oh, now I'm focusing. Baruch Hashem. So
What's the difference if it's upside down or right side up? You're still pushing earth away when you remove it.
No, because like I showed you in the picture, let me pull that picture out. Like I demonstrated in the picture, if it's right side up, here when you pull it up, if this is the ground, when you pull it up, it's getting thinner, progressively thinner as it goes down. So when I lift this up, I'm not moving any earth. Now Chaim Tzvi suggested that the earth might cave in. That we're not worried about. But I'm not actually moving the earth as I'm pulling it out. But if I had the radish upside down, I pulled it out. So this area here and this area here, I'm directly moving by pulling the radish.
Goodness. Wow. Okay.
Okay. So let's see what the Rabbi says. Tiltul b'natzad. If you're doing something tiltul b'natzad, l'tzorech davar mutter. So that's exactly the case of the radish. I'm pulling the radish head upside down. I'm moving earth around, but I'm only doing it for the use of the radish, which is mutter. Mutter, that's allowed. Therefore, tznoin shetaman ba'aretz u'mitzas olav magulin v'lo hishrish. Of course, if it stayed in the ground long enough that it started growing roots, then you have what David Leibman said. Then it's already a problem of toilish. So we're speaking where it didn't grow any roots. The gam lo nischaven l'zriya, and when you put it in the ground, you had no intention for it to be planted. You were just storing it there. Noitly you're allowed to pull it out. Afal pi shebiniti losoi mezes afram koybe. By definition, when you're pulling that radish out, you're moving earth around. And even if the vegetable grew in the ground because it absorbed moisture, it's still mutter. However, the tiltable gufay, but moving something with your guf, so this is the mechaber answering our kasha. In our case, you were actually moving muksa around, not l'tzarech davar mutter. It was l'tzarech davar aser. You want to move around the straw, which is muksa. You're not dealing with the davar mutter at all. How could you do that? How could you do that? The answer is because I'm not doing it with my hand. I'm doing it with my guf. So we see now there's two types of tiltul manatzad. A tiltul manatzad means indirectly moving muksa, I'm pulling the radish and that's causing the earth to move, that's only mutter l'tzorech davar mutter. But doing something with my foot, doing a malacha with my foot or with my shoulder, there it's going to be mutter even l'tzorech davar aser, which is a huge chiddush. Hilchach kash al amita, the stamai muktzah la'asaka, you normally assume that it's set aside to be used as fuel. Minana de gufa, you're allowed to move it around with your goof. Then minana fil b'yodoi, because then it's not muktzah. So this is the most important thing. Let's look at Lamed in the Mishnah Berurah. Now here's a case where the Mishnah Berurah is mekel. So the Mishnah Berurah says v'tilta b'guvay pirish she'enim negei b'yodoi kim b'gufo. You're not touching it with your hand. You're using your goof, like with your foot or your shoulder or b'shari vorv mikelin b'yoser mishar tiltal b'natzad. It's less. So there's two. Not all tiltal b'natzads were created equal. There's two levels. There's one tiltal b'natzad when you're carrying something properly and you're moving muktzah indirectly. That's only mutter or l'tzorech davar mutter. But if you're doing tiltal b'natzad, meaning you're doing klachiyad with your foot, with your shoulder, that's mutter even l'tzorech davar aser. Okay, mutter afilu l'tzorech davar aser. Meaning you're allowed to kick. You're allowed.
Oops.
You can reset your internet box on Shabbos with your shoulder.
Or you have to dig a new internet box out of the ground.
I'm sorry, I got cut off again. Okay, let's try this again.
I think it's Trump doing it to you.
I think it's Trump. Maybe it's the liberals.
That's
Okay.
a little bit better.
So that the liberals are trying to shut down the religious learning about kalponim. So you see that you're allowed to do something with your shoulder, even if it's tzorech davar aser, which is a chiddush halacha. A and B, there are those who are machmer and say only if it's agavarcha, you're not allowed to go ahead to move something around with your shoulder if it's muktzah. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. The next thing we're going to get, the next subject that it's going to be the Gelamaisa will be if you're allowed to clean off your shoes from mud and how you're supposed to do that. But we'll see that soon. Amar Bida, Hani Palpali, if you have peppers, Meidak, Chada, the Kata de Zachina Shari, you're allowed to crush one little pepper kernel at a time with the handle of a knife. But Tarte, two together, Aser would be Aser. So the first question is this Shabbos or is this Yom Tov? So the Tosfos brings down, it's the long Tosfos over here. Tosfos brings down that there's a shita of the Mechilta, the Shiltus of Rabbi Choi. He brings down this is Yom Tov. On Shabbos it wouldn't be allowed. Tosfos vehemently argues and says, of course this is speaking about Shabbos, because on Yom Tov you should be allowed to grind as many peppers as you want. You're allowed to do things l'tzorech leichel nefesh. So Tosfos learns that you're allowed to do this even on Shabbos, grinding one pepper at a time. A and B is with the handle of a knife. It's not the normal way to do it. You'd be allowed to do it. But Tarti also. Rav Amar. Now Tosfos at the end says on Yom Tov you're allowed to grind peppers, but he does bring that at Tzad. That could be you're only allowed to grind peppers on Yom Tov if you couldn't have prepared them before. So let's say you didn't realize that you're going to be interested in the type of dish, and on Yom Tov you decide that you want to make this dish and you need peppers for it, then you'd be allowed to grind those peppers. But if you knew before Yom Tov that you're going to be making a dish that needs peppers, you have to prepare them before. Rav Amar, Kivin de Meshani, Afilo Tuvanami. Since you're not doing it the normal way, you're using the handle of a knife, therefore you're allowed to grind even more than one pepper at a time. Amar Vida, Man de Sachi b'maya. If someone is bathing in water, Lin give nafshe beresha. He should make sure to really, really dry himself off before he walks out of the water along the river edge. And then he should depart on his trip. Because if he has droplets of water on him, Dilma osila suya dalaramis bekarmelis, he might end up carrying that water for Amis, and in the Karmelis, which is only the Rabbanon, even there, the Gemara is concerned. In fact, the Gemara, if you're telling me that you're not allowed to move water around in a Karmelis, The usher, it should be usher. So everyone knows when you walk into a body of water, you see the waves forming around you and they travel far. So you're moving the water in the lake. When you go into a lake, you're moving the water in the lake, and you're moving it for Amos. How can you do that? So you're not directly moving the water. It's your koyach moving the carmelis. Your koyach moving water in the carmelis. When your koyach is moving water in the carmelis, there's no isser. That's not the isser. The isser is only to directly move water, and therefore, if you're moving
What's
water,
he doing in the lake on Shabbos? What's the heter?
you're allowed to be wet on Shabbos. You're allowed to go into a lake if it's cold.
If it's what?
If it's cold, you're allowed to go to a lake.
Oh, it's
You're not allowed
cold.
to bathe in warm water. In cold, you're allowed to bathe, and you're allowed to go to a mikveh. So people go to the mikveh all the time in lakes. They go into warm water too, actually. So a guy who came out of the mikveh, he has to be careful. If he's a carmelis around him, he's not in the makom with the erev, he has to dry himself off really well because he's not allowed to carry the water in the carmelis.
Yosy, what's an example of koichai versus non-koichai?
Very simple.
Everything.
If I took a vashtapel and I filled it up with water and I'm walking with it, that's not koichai. I'm directly moving the water. But if I go into a body of water and I displace water and that pushes water out of the way, so now it's my koyach pushing the water further and further away. But I'm not directly carrying it like in a cup. Does that make sense? Okay.
I'm digesting it. I don't see a difference. I mean, it's if koich is this, you're displacing the water. It's you. You're displacing it.
Yeah,
Right?
but I'm not making the water move for Amos. I'm just clearing it around from around me. But you create a wave in the water that travels as far as it goes.
Maybe this is similar to throwing something. Is this similar to throwing something?
It would be similar to throwing something. So when it's your koyach, they were not koyach in the carmelis. So you're asking me, you're not allowed to throw something in a carmelis for Amos. I guess that's what you mean to ask. I'm not sure. So I guess this is even less than that. But you're right. Throwing something should be the same halacha. And I don't think you're allowed to throw something dalat Amos or Shishar Amos. That's a very good point. So I'm not sure. I think David's asking a very good question. Why is this any different than throwing? Because they're both koichai. If anybody has an answer for me, I would love if you share it. I think that's a good question.
Maybe because the water that you're moving is different water, whereas the item you threw is the same item you threw.
Could be. I don't know if anyone says anything about it. Does anybody say anything about it? I don't think so.
It's not a Rosh Hashanah, isn't it a Carmelis?
Yes, you see there's a hakpada even in a carmelis. But you weren't allowed to
throw a ball
carry.
at a Carmelis?
I'm not sure. That's what DYLIve is asking. If you see koicha is mutter in a carmelis, does that mean you're allowed to throw a ball in a carmelis? And as far as we know, if you're in the city without an erev, are you allowed to throw a ball? Are you allowed to play catch? I don't think so.
But Carmelis is not Rosh Hashanah.
Correct, but if you're in a city without an erev, you're not in Rosh Hashanah. Most of our
It's a baseball stadium. It's a heter to the baseball stadium. It's a shared area.
Today, a baseball stadium is no longer Rosh Hashanah. You're only allowed to have 10 people in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. So the question here is, forget mikveh. How can you walk in the rain? If we're worried about a little water on you when you come out of the mikveh, how could you walk in the rain? You're carrying water. So that is the big raid on this sugya. So they have a whole bunch of different svars that are said. The Torah says, halacha l'maaseh, you're allowed to walk in water. The Rosh explains why. The Rosh says, because in a river, when you come out of a river, there'll be a lot of water on you. But when you come in and you walk in the rain, it's very little water. For the Torah, what about a big heavy rain? You could sometimes be soaked and drenched to the core, full of water. How would that be allowed? So the Torah says the reason why it would be allowed is because walking in the rain is an onus. You don't have to go swimming. You don't have to go into water. But if you're walking in the rain, you're an onus. What are you supposed to do? Because of that, they weren't geyser to let you do it. So the shaila is, are you allowed to walk into Rosh Hashanah after you come out of a mikveh? So the Rebbe Shalom holds, and since you've dried yourself up So there's a little water that you're not allowed to squeeze out your hair. So there is some water on you, but since you dried it up, and it's onions because you have to go to the mikveh, therefore there's no problem walking with the mikveh. And he even brings down, someone else brought down that our Rizal held that you're not supposed to completely dry yourself up when you come out of the mikveh. You actually have to let yourself retain some of the water on you. So then for sure, it would be considered an onus, according to the Rizal, because since you have to. The Magen Avraham says as far, it all depends on whether you want the water on you or not. When it's raining, you didn't want the water on you. You'd rather it didn't rain. Therefore, it wouldn't be a problem. But if you went into a body of water, clearly you wanted that water, and that's where there'd be a problem.
Can I ask you as an aside why the Ari HaKodesh would want you to have some water on? You know
Well,
that? But why would he Bedavka want you to have some water?
Some water for the mikveh. I guess the kedusha of the mikveh must be on you.
Oh, the highlight from the mikveh. The highlight from the mikveh should still be on you.
I guess so. Did I say over the story that Shia Shachachevsky told me from Rabbi Chaim Mendel Bratsky about mikveh? When Shmuel Gross built Rav Chaim Mendel Bratsky's house, Rashiva's house, he put a mikveh into the house. And Mrs. Bratsky was very against it. Mrs. Bratsky said, how could you, she was a Litvak, she's Reb Nachum's daughter. First time you're putting a mikveh in the house, you're being mevatel Takanas Ezra. Because the whole of our Takanas Ezra was that you can't learn if you didn't go to the mikveh, is to, so Shalayu, Talmid Chacham, Mitzume, Shal like Tanagoyim, that the men shouldn't be too much with their wives. If you have a mikveh in your house, there's no inconvenience of going to the mikveh, so your wife, you got rid of the whole Takanas Ezra. So that's a very Litvish shayla to ask. So Reb Chaim Mendel, who's a real Litvak as well, let me tell you the Hasidic Shavart that he answered. He told his wife, you think that the Takanas Ezra is to create inconvenience? And since it's inconvenient to go to the mikveh, that's why people are going to stay away from their wives? Absolutely not. It's the kedusha that the mikveh puts into a person. That's going to create a certain level of kedusha, so he won't be mitzuri neshul neshasayim. It has nothing to do with the inconvenience. So memela mikveh is a good zach. So don't say having a mikveh in your house, it's mevatel the Takanas Ezra, adrabah. It's more kedusha. That's something you wouldn't necessarily expect from Reb Chaim Mendel. But you see, Reb Chaim Mendel had a chassidish heart.
Yes, Zalman, I became a fan.
It's a beautiful word. You never thought of it.
The beauty.
Misamet wasn't that kosher of a mikveh, so it wasn't an utter mikveh. A mikveh special for men.
That's right. Okay, so let's see what we have over here. Zok Ele Gemor weiter. If you have mud on your foot, you're better off rubbing your feet off in the ground. Don't rub it off on the wall, the mud. Why shouldn't you rub it off on the wall? Because it looks like you're adding cement. You're putting, the mud is like cement. It looks like you're adding cement to the wall. That's called building. If you try doing that on a building, people are going to pressure wash the mud off. They don't want it there. That's a building of a farmer. That's not a good building. So that shouldn't be a problem. I'll tell you exactly the opposite. Only scrape off the mud on the wall. Never rub off your feet in grass. That's halacha l'maisa. If you have mud on your boots, you shouldn't use the grass as a rug to wipe off the mud from your shoes, because there's a problem of dilma asur l'shviya gumois. So if you ever have mud on your shoes, you scrape it off on a step, scrape it off on a sharp brick or something, but don't rub it off. Don't rub the mud off in the grass. Itmar. Mar Bared Ravina Omar, Echad Zav Echad Asur. You're not allowed to wipe your shoes off at all. Papa Omar, Echad Zav Echad Mutter. Tomorrow, the Mar Bared Ravina, the Maimah Kanchelei. According to Mar Ravina, what are you supposed, if you step into mud, what are you supposed to wipe off your boots with? If he doesn't allow us to rub it off in the grass nor on the piece of brick, so tomorrow, you should rub it off on the beam that's lying on the floor. For sure, that doesn't look like you're trying to build anything. Amarava. Okay, so let's stop here for a second, because now we have to discuss wiping shoes off. So I don't know if you remember, they used to have in entranceways, they used to have like a metal type of rug. It was actually a metal rug that you would rub you would wipe off your shoes. And that could be a problem. So let's look up what it says over here. The halacha, let's see where the halacha is over here. Vav. So Vav is Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Bez, Sif Vav. Shin Bez Vav. So let's have a look at that because that's also very interesting. The halacha.
Mechi, you've been very quiet.
It's getting very frustrating. I apologize. So let's try this one more time. Okay, here we go. So we're back at halacha says that you're supposed to wipe it off on the koisel, out on the ground. The muscle shigomis. The yesh misha oiser af bekoisel. There are those who hold that you're not allowed to rub it off even on the wall, like we learned in our Gemara. Hagav yesh misha mater b'shnei. There are those who are mater by both. Sai on the earth, sai on the wall. You're also allowed to use some cheres. So what does it say in the Mishabur? After Kaisel, Shalavanim, Mishum the Mechse, Kemoisha Valabinian, Umechaskoi. Today in the Khanchela Bekoira. Oil Gabe Evan, wood in the shore because Shal Eitz on wood. So this is what we learned in our Gemara. But where Mater Bishneim, the Lamoisha Valabinian Loich Hashinan, Mishum the Binin Chaklahu, Ushami Yikaneach, Bamakama Vishvena, Kamkim Loich Hashinan. So you see, there are those who are Mako, they're allowed to wipe every shoes no matter what. The Kamakam affiliate the two. You should be careful. Don't rub off your feet in the mud if you're doing it on the grass. Be careful; it's not in a place where there's a hole or a hole there, and then you'll be filling it in by moving your feet around. Be careful. And therefore, the mutter b'shneim would be allowed to. Lesser b'shneim. The nearer the Koisel Bavadi Yeshlismach Lahati Kadas Machaber, the Mishabur is being machriya that you could wipe your feet on the wall, Shekain Das Roy very shining. But you should not do it in the grass. So the Mishabur seems to say you shouldn't do it in the grass. Now they also discuss metal, and they say with metal, oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. With metal is going to be negay later in the Gemara. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Itmar Marber Dervina Amar Echad Zav Echad Zaser Amar Papa Amar Echad Zav Echad Zav Mutter Lamarber Dervina B'man Mekachel Mekachel B'Koyer Amar Rava Leilesav in the Shapuma de Lachaya. The halach is, we know when you have a movui, so you have to make something called a heter. So let's say this is our movui, and it opens up into Rishus Harabim. So people are walking back and forth here. You have to have a heker, let's say a lechi. A lechi would be a post over here. Or you'd have to have a koira, a beam going across. So the Gemara is saying, don't hang around in this area. Don't hang around right here in this area. And we're going to soon see why. So the Gemara says, don't hang around in that area. Don't sit right there where the lechi is. You might have something in your hand that you might drop, and it will roll into the Rishus Harabim within 4 amas. And you're going to take it and bring it back in. And then you're bringing something from a Rishus Harabim to a Rishus Hayochid. That wouldn't be allowed. So don't hang around in that area. They used to, when they had their barrels lying on the side, they would roll it around on the earth to get it to settle in a place. So you're not allowed to roll it around because it's exactly a steamroller. If there's a hole there, it's going to smooth something out. You're not allowed to steamroll on Shabbos. A person shouldn't take, they used to stop off drugs with is with a little piece of cotton with a shmata, they would stick it in. If you have a wet
There we went again.
funny. It never used to be this bad.
I never had internet problems in my house, so it's not the area.
You live near Yosy Zalman?
Yeah.
Yes. That was me again.
Yeah, we
kiss.
know.
So we're talking about rub the material together. You're allowed to rub the material together from the inside. So if the stain is right over here, let's say I have a stain over here, I'm not allowed to go like this. I'm allowed to put on my shirt and then from the inside rub it together like that. That I would be allowed to do. Zok Tehillah Gemara. Zok Tehillah Gemara. So Rashi's maybe you're allowed to do it. It doesn't look like you're trying to clean it. It's not really the derais of malabin, the inois and shamayim. So the derais there's only an isser if you have water. If it's dry, it's only a problem of mechzik malabin. It's only mechzik malabin if you rub it together, grabbing it from the surface that the stain is on. Rub it from the surface behind where the stain is not on, you'd be allowed to do it. Meisvei, tichal gabe benola. If you have mud on your shoe, megairoi begav sakin. You're allowed to scrape it off with the back of a knife. Bishal big doy, and if it's on your beged, megairoi b'tziparin. You're allowed to scrape it off with your nail. Uvavad shaloi chaskin. You're not allowed to scrub them together. You're just allowed to scrape it off. So my lav shaloi kaskasem klal. Shaloi yikaskes klal. You're not allowed to scrub it at all. Not from the inside, not from the outside. So you're allowed to rub it from the inside, that would be allowed. You're allowed to scrape off a new shoe, not an old shoe, because Rashi says an old shoe, the leather is weaker, and if you scrape mud off of it, you're also going to be scraping off a layer of leather, and that's called memachek. That's one of the steps in the process of preparing leather. That's not going to be allowed. So how should you get dirt off an old shoe? The gav sakin, with a knife, with the back of a knife. I'm sorry, but how do you clean off a new one with a knife? An old one, you have a problem. Your psak, get rid of. Listen to my psak. You're not allowed to scrape off saya new and saya old. You're not allowed to scrape off because again you're scraping off a layer of leather. Don't pour oil on your foot because that oil is also going to be going into the leather, which is also ma'abed, and it looks like ma'abed, and there's a problem. That's a problem of one of the steps in preparing leather. Sandal, you're allowed to first smear your foot with oil before you put it into the shoe, and then you can put it into the shoe. Sandal in the sandal. Or you're allowed to moisturize your whole body with oil. And then you could roll over a big flat piece of leather, and we don't say that's considered tying the leather, because you really put the oil on yourself. The little bit that went off you onto the leather is not a problem. And you don't have to worry about it. That we said.
You're allowed to smear yourself. You're allowed to smear yourself with oil on Shabbos.
Oil, yes. You're allowed to put oil on you. Yeah, you're not allowed to put cream, but oil you're allowed. So before we go by there, I rushed through the Minal Chodesh because I'm always afraid that the internet's going to shut down again. But about using the knife on leather, there are those who hold that those metal mats that they used to have when you walked into the front entrance, you were not allowed to rub your feet on those hard because that's the same problem. We're worried it's going to scrape off some leather. Nowadays, most entranceways don't have metal mats. They just have some type of cloth mat. But if you remember, they used to have in entranceways, it would be like a metal grate that you stood on where you rubbed your shoes off. Those are problematic. And even the Mishabur speaks about it and says you have to be very soft when you rub on those. I don't know. It probably makes a difference if you have a leather sole or if you have a rubber sole. Could be by rubber. There's no problem anyway. So that you're allowed to put on. Rashi is that you're allowed to put oil on. That it's mutter to smear on your foot and then put it into the shoe is only if you're mechaven to smear the shoe, which doesn't make any sense, Dr. Gemara. If you want, so if you just want to smear it, like to polish it, then it would be allowed. If you're actually putting the oil on your foot because you want to actually do ibud, which is mamish the malacha deraisa, that will be usher. In fact, the more la'avdo pshita, of course you're not allowed to put oil on leather because you want to work it out. That's mamish the deraisa. V'sul tzachtzachai mi'ikal aman deshar.
Okay, I'm willing to get him a new internet. Chaim Tzvi, I'm stepping up.
Maybe he should put it the router right where his office, wherever he's learning.
What's that?
Maybe he set up the router right where next to, so he'll have better signal.
It's not his. I think he sometimes shares with Samsonovich.
Oh.
No, actually, if I'm not on Samsonovich's now, I'm on my own, and that's my problem. And I forgot the password, and I don't want to take a break to find the password. So I'll have to set it for tomorrow. You're only allowed to put a little bit of oil on your shoe because you can never come to ibud. There's not enough oil there. If you put on enough oil that can actually do an ibud on the leather, that would be awesome. So we only allow, even when we allow you to pour oil on your foot, it's only if it's so little oil that it, no matter what, it could never come to ibud. A small foot, if you have a small foot, don't walk out with a big shoe because it might fall off and then you're going to carry it. But even if you're a small guy, you're allowed to go out with a big jacket. You know why? Because a jacket won't fall off and you're not going to take it off because you don't want to be naked in the street. So let's say a woman shouldn't go with a torn shoe because she's embarrassed and she might end up taking it off. If people start staring at her, she'll take it off and carry it. She shouldn't do chalitza with a torn shoe, but if she did a chalitza shekshera, the chalitza would be kosher. And you're not allowed to go out with a brand new shoe. Why aren't you allowed to go with a brand new shoe? Because we're talking about a lady, Rashi says, if the shoe doesn't fit her just right, a man doesn't care. But a woman is concerned and she might take it off on Shabbos. So therefore, a lady may not go out with a brand new shoe on Shabbos. That's only if it's a woman's shoe. A man doesn't care if it doesn't fit right. That's only if she hasn't worn it at all during the day, and therefore she doesn't know if it fits her. If she wore it even a little bit Erev Shabbos, mutter, then she's allowed to go out with it on Shabbos because she's already had an opportunity to make sure that it fits her. So therefore, it's allowed on Shabbos as well.
But usually women buy shoes, they try it on first. So they know that.
I guess this was a woman who got it as a gift. Maybe it must be where she didn't try it on. Yeah, if she tried it on and she knows that it fits her, it's not an issue. An amos is the form on which they made the shoe. So you have a fully formed shoe. It's still sitting on the shoemaker's form. You're allowed to take the shoe off. You're allowed to pull the form out from the shoe. But Tanya, you're not allowed to take the shoe off from the form. So would you be allowed to or wouldn't you be allowed to? It's not a steer. It's totally in whether or not the shoe is muktzah. Because the shoe has just been finished, sitting on the form is a muktzah. If it's muktzah, you're not allowed to take it off. If it's not muktzah, you're allowed to take it off. Titnan, minal shal gabe imos. You have a shoe that's on the form. Rabbi Lezer matayir. Rabbi Lezer it's Torah because it's not yet a keli, which means if it's not yet a keli, it's still going to be muktzah. So Rabbi Lezer's matayir is going to be the time of our brisa who holds ain't shemtin because it's muktzah. The chachamim matamim, they hold this as a complete keli, and therefore he holds it wouldn't be muktzah. You'd be allowed to take the shoe off the form. So the way you're explaining this machloikis between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan is good according to Rava, the Amar who says, Dover shemalach le'iser, bein letzorech gufoy, bein letzorech mekayim mutter. Now you have to understand, even though the shoe is not muktzah, the emos, the form, is a klisha malach le'iser. It's made to build shoes on. That's for sure muktzah. So how can you take that form out of the shoe? It's a klisha malach le'iser. The teretz is, I need it l'tzorech mekoymai, because I need the place of that form to put my foot into. So according to Rava, who says a klisha melach l'isher, I'm allowed to move it if I need its place to put my foot, shapir, then it makes sense why, according to the Rabban, you're allowed to do it. Abaye holds even a klisha melach l'isher, you're only allowed to touch it if you need it for its kufa. If I need a hammer to crack walnuts. But if I'm moving a klisha melach l'isher away from where it is, just because I needed space, it would be usher. How would he understand the brayso that says that you're allowed to take the form out of a shoe to wear on Shabbos? Even if it's not muktzah, even if the shoe is not muktzah, but the form is muktzah. So tomorrow, it's speaking where it was very loose. Rashi says, the shoe comes out easily. Since it's very loose, you can just lift the shoe off without even moving the form. You don't have to pull the form out. And that's why it's going to be mutter. The Tanya Agudah Aimer, mutter. If the shoe is very loose on the form, then you're allowed to take it out. So now let's be medaik fakert. You're only allowed to take it out because it's loose, so you can slip the shoe off easily. If it was tight, you wouldn't be allowed to. That makes sense according to Abaye. The reason why Agudah said it's only allowed if it's loose is because he must hold a kabaye. According to Rava, you should be allowed to take out the shoe even though it's not loose. And Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be loose. According to Rava, it shouldn't have to be loose. You should be allowed to take out the form anyway because it's a tzarech b'kaymai. So you're right. Rava will learn Rabbi Yehuda who says dafka if it's loose and not if it's tight. He's going to learn because if it's tight, it's still going to be muksa. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda he's saying it because he holds if a shoe is still tight on the form, even Rabbi Eliezer will be moida that it's Rabbi Eliezer holds it's muksa. When is a shoe muksa? If it's tight on the form, then it's not a keli yet. But once the shoe is not tight on the form, it's loose. Then we say the shoe has its independence, and then the shoe will no longer be muksa. So Rava is going to learn that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, holds the shoe is muksa. If it's loose, it won't be muksa. But avada lagabi the amos itself, you're only allowed to take the shoe off of it if it's very loose, because otherwise, it's the tzarech mekaymai. So just to make it clear, according to Abaye, the reason why the shoe has to be loose is so that you can take the shoe off of the emos without moving the emos, because the emos will be muksa. You cannot move it l'tzarech mekaymai. According to Rava, the reason why it has to be loose is to tell us a chiddush, even though Rabbi Eliezer normally holds that it's not considered a keli, and therefore the shoe would be muksa. If it's very loose, even Rabbi Eliezer would be moided that the shoe is not muksa, and you'd be allowed to take it off because once it's loose, it's not part of the imus anymore. We consider it complete. If the oilam wants to go weiter, I'm more than happy to. If the oilam would rather stop now, that's fine as well.
What time are we starting tomorrow? I think by law we have to
normally
give
start 6:45.
like drivers. Yeah, we got to give the oilam at least a 7-hour rest period.
Okay,
like
so we'll
bus
stop
drivers.
now and we'll learn the mitzvah from 6:45 tomorrow. First share and second share will be 9.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry about my internet. I'll between now and then I'll get it fixed.
Shkoyach, Yosy Zalman, shkoyach, Akiva.
Yosy, what did they? Are we on the same one as now? 1948.
No, tomorrow we're on 6713.
6713. Okay.
And for the 9 o'clock share, we'll quickly slip into the breakout room so we don't spook out Rabbi Reese.
7613.
Akiva, thank you for letting me go to bed.